And I do think that belonging would become more secure, more wanted, more desirable, stronger because there's brain connection, not just a heart connection.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, today in the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, I want to talk about something that I thought was really fun. It's out of a report from the University of Nottingham in the UK, and it shows that moms and their children display synchronized neural activity when they're playing together, even when they're not speaking the same language. Like if they're speaking a language that's non-native to them, to their location. So this would be like people that would be living in England that would be speaking like French or Spanish. They still demonstrate a brain bonding effect that doesn't get lost in the difference of the language they're speaking. This is kind of a interbrain synchrony. That's kind of what some people are calling it. And it's described as simultaneous activity of neural networks across the brains of people who are socially interacting. It isn't limited to moms and kids, though, and that's something that they're learning. Synchrony actually occurs when people work and learn and talk and play, and especially when they sing together, which I think is so exciting when we think about what happens when we go to church and we sing praises together, that there is this synchrony that's happening inside of our minds that actually works in the same way. It's what bonds us together. And I think it's super cool. But I want to bring this to you and just kind of ask, thinking of this as a parent, when we play with our kids, it actually does something. It unites us in a way that is more than just like physical. It actually, what we're finding from this study is actually something that works inside of our brains. Our brains work together. Like they have the same firing and they look the same when we put them underneath the microscope. Although I don't think you put a brain under a microscope, you put it under something else. But when that happens, something unique happens. What do you make of this concept of synchrony?
I love this. I love that we're talking about this. I think it's so encouraging. It bonds the family together. And it's why we want moms to play with their kids and not always the caregiver to play with the kids. Like I could make a case for staying home from work. I could make a case for, again, put your phone down and play with your kids. How many times have you heard me say, Wayne, when somebody is asked, what did you do today? You never say, well, not much. I just played with my kids. There might not be anything more important than putting down your work and playing with your children. It's how they know that you like them and love them and care about them. And now we know that it will bond you together. The thinking patterns become the same. I think it's fascinating. It helps them become like us. And wouldn't it be easier to live together if there was more in common between you and your kids? I just think it's super fun to think about. And, the two kids who play together, right? So the oldest who plays with the youngest and the two in the middle who play together and they love playing together, everything from checkers to shooting hoops outside to just, a random walk in the park. When we get our siblings to pay attention to each other, they bond in this neural activity, become more like the sibling, and now they want to spend more time together. I think this is fascinating and so much fun to think about.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I think that the part that like blows up in my mind is that when we do things together, our brains look similar. This is why I want my kids to sing with me in church, and I don't just want them to stand up when the person says stand up. It's why I lean into my little daughter's ear and say, hey, do you know this song? And sometimes they're like, no. And I say, well, try. Just sing with me. Sing the words after I sing them. It's so funny when you're sitting next to us, probably in church, because these little 3-year-olds are like yelling. It's not even singing, it's just yelling. But I think that it actually does something. And now I'm finding out that it actually does something in our brain.
Yeah.
What do you think this tells us about the role of belonging for our kids? Because I think it does something more than just helps us think together, right? But there's got to be something that's developing here with belonging, right? Especially with the power of parent and play and those things. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a great insight. But let me back up a minute and talk about singing. Like, I agree. I'm a fan of the children sitting with the parents. Like I've been to church with you and your wife, Nancy, and all 8 kids in the row, and you make room for me. And I really appreciate that because there's not a lot of room left,
And it's a
you
little
know?
crazy.
Yeah, but it's good crazy. Like, it's good crazy. I love it when, one of the younger girls wants to sit on your lap and the other one on Nancy's lap or whatever. I mean, it's just good and it bonds us, and the singing is a really beautiful thing. And if they're not sitting with you, but they're in church, that's better than if they're not in church. But we want them to see that they're mimicking us, that there's something in common, that, hey, I like to sing and so does dad. Look at his face. And I just think it's a beautiful thing. I do agree with you with the belonging. I think that this brain connection would cause the children to want to be with you more than with someone else. When they hang out with the grandparents, they feel safe with the grandparents. They want to be with the grandparents. They know in the knowing of their knowing that the grandfather knows them well. They can't explain it because they don't understand how their brains have connected. But my goodness, I think this is fascinating. And I do think that belonging would become more secure, more wanted, more desirable, stronger because there's brain connection, not just a heart connection. So cool to think about.
You know, I agree. I think that there's so much that goes in the right direction when we're doing these things together, singing together, going to church together, playing together. I mean, this study really does look more at play, what happens when kids play with their parents and how that, impacted their brain working and neural networks and everything. But I think that there's some times with us as parents where we run into issues where we're not in unison with our kids, where our kids don't want to play with us. I've got one son that doesn't really enjoy singing. And so it is really hard for him at church when I'm like, dude, I want you to sing. And he's like, I don't want to. I don't think this is enjoyable. This is like if you asked me, do you want to go lift weights? Not really. I get sore every time I leave the gym. That doesn't sound like a good time to me, right? But I think that there's some things here that as parents we run into where we aren't in sync with our kids, or our kids don't want to do the things that we like to do that would make us feel like we're in unison or we're synchronous. What should parents do when their kids aren't in that space and don't want to spend time with them? Is it important for us to be in sync, to be synchronous?
Oh, yes, I do think so. At the same time that I think we need to offer them grace, and they are created in God's image, not ours. So they will have some differences. And certainly forcing them to do everything that we do the way that we do it is not going to be wise. At some point, that's going to kind of blow up in your face. What I wondered about as you were speaking was the idea that we let them lead and we walk toward them sometimes. So maybe you have a son who doesn't really enjoy singing, but still is obedient, is in church, is standing in respect to the Lord, but does want to, kick a rock. Then you go kick a rock. You've got a daughter who, loves insects. You don't really care for insects, but is thoroughly, encouraged by all the different insects that God created. And so you examine the pictures and read the book and even watch a TED talk or something that's, about insects because you love your daughter. So I think we walk toward them. We don't make them just walk toward us. And I think, we keep engaging. We keep expecting there to be growth. We affirm them so they want to be with us. We are optimistic and joyful and hopeful and encouraging. So again, that they want to be with us. And I love what you were saying here about play. And I just want to back up and say that when I was researching my book about technology and I was looking at parents' use of the camera, and I had more than one kid with really heartache say to me, I wish my parents would play with me. They just watch me play. Dr. Kathy, they take pictures of me playing, but they don't play with me. So I just want to encourage parents that I do think that it's when kids feel liked and safe and seen and known, when it's everything from, the dollhouse and the pretend housekeeping corner to, a game that you might not even enjoy, but it's not about you and your joy in that moment. It's about your kid knowing that they matter to you. So I do want to just say again that play matters.
As Dr. Kathy and I talked today, it reminds me of a passage and how Paul actually starts 1 Corinthians chapter 11. I'll just read verse 1. Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. I love the way that Paul enters into really 1 Corinthians 11, this passage where it talks about going to church and being a part of worship. and what we need to do as a church. And Paul's really correcting the Corinthian church on their views of worship. But Paul didn't disciple people primarily through lectures, and he didn't lecture the church necessarily in this. He actually lives with them, and they learn by watching and imitating and being with him, and then he instructs them. What researchers call synchrony, really this idea of shared neural activity, it isn't something that's new. It's actually something that we see inside of Scripture and inside of life going back millennia. Scripture has always assumed that formation happens through shared rhythms. Kids don't just listen to us, they tune us in. So when we play with our kids and when we laugh with our kids, when we build things with our kids and solve problems with our kids, even when we sit in silence with our kids, there's an aligning that's going on with our kids. Our kids are aligning with us emotionally and relationally, even biologically. And this is belonging in action. This reflects how God designed us, not to be people who do isolated tasks and think in isolated ways, but really as people who act and think and believe and move and have our presence as relational beings who are really formed through participation. Connection isn't built through instruction alone. It's actually built through shared life. We see that throughout Scripture. And now today, we have a fun example of how that's happening, even from science, that we can understand, know, and maybe be encouraged to go on that walk or to pull that board game out today. To know that when we do that, we're doing more than sharing an activity. We're actually sharing the way that we think with our kids, and we're doing it together. And I think that doing life together in this way, and maybe a little bit with this background and reasoning, it's going to be the bright light that shines and cuts through some big challenge for our kids in the future. So lean into that today. I'm so thankful that you joined us today in the Celebrate Kids podcast, especially this daily segment, Facing the Dark. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender. Glad you joined us today, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.